Well, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to today's conversation. This is a dynamic discussion that we are in for from our panelists today. We're going to be talking more about increasing access and equity when creating the jobs of the future. I'm Emilie Aries. I'm the founder and CEO of Bossed Up. We are a career services and leadership development organization committed to closing the gender leadership gap. Now, I got my start in the world of campaigns and elections prior to launching Bossed Up 10 years ago. And so today's conversation, when I got my start as the Rhode Island state director with Organizing for America, today's conversation really feels like coming home because we'll be talking about that public-private intersection of big public policies and their impact on the private sector. So it's an absolute honor and delight to be moderating today's conversation, which is going to span both the federal, national level, and I'm joined by so many phenomenal experts and women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics right here in Colorado, where I'm proud to call home. So we'll be talking about the Colorado state implications as well as the federal implications of the CHIPS and Science Act. A few housekeeping notes as we get started. Use chat throughout the course of today's panel. I encourage you to drop resources, weigh in with your thoughts. If you want to get connected with other incredible people here, drop your LinkedIn. Let's find a way to stay connected with one another beyond today. Chat is a great place to weigh in with your thoughts and converse amongst each other as attendees. But the Q&A function is going to be your best bet for asking questions of our panelists. So towards the bottom or top of your screen, you'll see a Q&A button. Press that and type in your question there throughout the conversation. We will be taking questions at the very end. So know that you can submit throughout. We'll be moderating those questions at the very end. And remember, it takes courage to ask a question. There's no such thing as a stupid question. There's no question too big or too small. If you have a question, I guarantee you others share the same curiosity. So it's an act of leadership to go ahead and ask that question. This conversation is being recorded. You will receive this recording since you registered for it today. And if there are folks you know should have been in this room, but for whatever reason could not be here today, that's your opportunity to share that recording and spread this message far and wide. Speaking of, we unfortunately are missing one of our esteemed guests today, Franny Matthews, President and CEO of the Colorado Technology Association, has a personal matter that came up. So at the last minute, she's been unable to join us. We're sending her our best and she in return. So know that we'll continue this conversation without her today, but she's a big part of what's happening here in Colorado's tech scene. Now, I'm going to give you a really brief rundown of our esteemed guests, all of whom have mile-long resumes and long lists of accolades to their name, but I'm going to give you a rundown just highlighting what's most relevant for today's conversation in particular. First and foremost, we're joined by Adrian Elrod, the Director of External and Government Affairs at the CHIPS Programs Office, part of the U.S. Department of Commerce. She's also a veteran of 3 presidential campaigns and was most recently president of Elrod Strategies, a strategic communications firm specializing in influencer engagement and public affairs. Adrian, thank you for being here. We're also joined by Helen Young Hayes, the founder and CEO of Activate Work, whose mission is to help diverse individuals achieve their fullest potential through the dignity of work. By providing access to and training for successful careers, Activate Work moves individuals to economic flourishing, creating triple wins for employers, placements, and the community. It's also worth noting that Helen's also the founder of the Colorado Inclusive Economy Movement, a CEO-led movement of design, action, and accountability to build the nation's most racially diverse and inclusive economy right here in Colorado. Thanks for being here, Helen. Janine Villarao is currently a space vehicle systems test engineer. Ooh, Janine, that's a mouthful of a title. At the one and only Ball Aerospace right here in Boulder, Colorado. Her work focuses on assembling, integrating, and testing various space-based systems for government and commercial customers. And she's also been a member of the Society of Women Engineers, or SWE, for over 10 years. She's held various leadership positions, most recently serving as the VP of Professional Development for SWE Rocky Mountain Section. Janine, welcome. And last but certainly not least, we're joined by Wendy Lee, a leading expert in digital innovation strategy and ecosystem development. As co-founder and chair of Energize Colorado, Wendy mobilizes resources and relief for small businesses, nonprofits, and individuals recovering from the economic impact of COVID-19. Wendy is also a co-founder and partner Hub Now Coalition, which was formed to accelerate statewide collaboration and highlight Colorado's strengths as a tech hub to bring together partners who will develop equitable, inclusive, and highly competitive applications for the Tech Hub designation, which, like Chips for America, is also authorized by the bipartisan Chips and Science Act. And I just heard that we have been successful. Thank you, Wendy, for your leadership. Quantum here in Colorado just got designation and is in the process of applying for additional support. And we're going to learn more about that and a whole lot more in today's conversation. So thanks for being here, Wendy.
My pleasure.
Awesome. Well, here's the deal. This is a nuanced topic. We're going to do our best as panelists today to break this topic down and make sure we all are equipped with the information we need to maximize the opportunities that are coming from the federal government's investment in the semiconductor manufacturing industry through the Chips and Science Act. So, Adrian, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about what the Chips and Science Act is, why it's so groundbreaking, and what workforce opportunities this presents, particularly for women and underrepresented workers.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, Emilie, for having me today. It's great to be with so many amazing women on this panel and to join all of you today and all of your guests. So just to quickly recap, the Chips and Science Act was passed in a bipartisan manner last summer in Congress. We don't always have bipartisanship on legislation, but this is a prime example of how Democrats and Republicans came together in the name of national and economic security. We passed this into law. By the way, Congress has been trying to pass the Chips and Science Act for a long time. So I want to give President Biden a lot of the leadership and credit for really getting this over the finish line. But basically, Congress authorized $50 billion to be spent to incentivize and onshore semiconductor manufacturing jobs here in the United States. Why is that important? Well, first of all, 0% of the world's leading edge chips. These are the chips that you find in your iPhones, in a lot of military equipment, and some of the most sophisticated devices that you use in your everyday life. 0% of those chips are made here in the United States. 92% of those chips are made at one factory. We call it a fab in the semiconductor world, in one fab, and that is in Taiwan, TSMC in Taiwan. So I don't have to tell you why that is not a situation that is sustainable for any players across the world. So we want to make sure that we are onshoring the jobs here. We're manufacturing a lot of the chips here that we actually design. We design a majority of the chips that are made across the world. Here in the United States, we just don't make them here. And we simply want to make sure that we are in a position where we don't have supply chain disruptions like we saw during the pandemic, where you might have to wait a year and a half to get an appliance for your house because of semiconductor shortages here in the United States. So for many, many reasons, it's important that we onshore more of these jobs, that we manufacture more of the chips here at home. I also want to, add that we have a couple funding opportunities that we have released so far. We have about 140 people on our team, so we build up the team very quickly. We released our first funding opportunity in February of this year for leading edge and mature node companies. So again, these are the companies that make the highly sophisticated chips and military equipment that you use in your iPhones, that you have in electric vehicles. But these are also the chips that you will see in a lot of just everyday household appliances. So the first funding opportunity was for those. We opened up that funding opportunity in June of this year to include large scale suppliers. So, this might be a company that actually, creates a silicon wafer, but doesn't actually fully design a chip. And the reason why we did this is because our goal, and Secretary Raimondo laid this out in a vision speech right before we released our funding opportunity. Our goal here is to make sure that at a bare minimum with this $50 billion, we are creating two new, by the way, leading edge, large scale clusters here in the US. So that means you would have a fab or several fabs, and then you would have a large network of suppliers within a close radius of that fab. Right now, oftentimes a chip literally travels around the world before it's finalized. And so we want to make sure that we can create more chips here, produce more chips here that don't have to travel across the world to become a semiconductor. In terms of workforce and how, we are making the Chips and Science Act accessible for women and minorities and veterans, you name it, we have really encouraged, obviously we encourage companies that are minority owned, women owned to apply for funding. We released a smaller funding opportunity, by the way, that I should add in September that includes smaller suppliers, companies, and projects with under $300 million CapEx. And we are doing this in part because we want to encourage, smaller suppliers, smaller companies to apply for these funds. And often those are a lot of companies that are owned by women and minorities. But we have also required all applicants to submit a workforce plan. And one of the reasons why we're doing this is because we're living in a very tight labor market. We want to make sure that every single person who is sitting on the sidelines, who is eligible and wants to work in a fab, wants to work in the semiconductor industry, can do that. So we've also required, which I'm very personally proud of, any applicant seeking over $150 million to submit a child care plan. And so I say that in tandem with the workforce plan, because we see this as really being hand in hand. There are so many women, as you know, Emilie, that are sitting on the sidelines right now who would love to be working, who would love to re-enter or enter the workforce for the first time, but they can't because they don't have adequate childcare for their family. And so we want to open up with those opportunities because, again, we are not doing a service to taxpayers if we are building these fabs, if we are investing resources to build these large factories, fabs where chips are made, but we're not filling those jobs with qualified people. So we wanted to see how companies are working with state and local stakeholders, with local universities and community colleges, with governors, state elected officials, who are the local partners they're working with to make sure that they can train that next generation of workers. And at the same time, they can also make sure that every eligible worker who is currently sitting on the sidelines is able to get back in the workforce. So I'm really excited to be working on this, on the implementation of the CHIPS Act. It's incredibly important. And I think we are using the levers of government in an effective way that we never have done before by really making sure that we are using every, again, tool at our disposal to get women and minorities and anybody on the sidelines who wants to re-enter the workforce. We're getting them off the sidelines. We're using the government to do that. And it's really an exciting time to be a part of implementing such a historic and unique program.
I love that, Adrienne. Well said. It just reminds me of how, to be clear, everyone would benefit from having more access to affordable quality childcare. But what is the lever that you have to work with right now through the Department of Commerce is saying, look, as we distribute these $50 billion worth of funds, we're going to make sure that the workplaces and the factories, the fabs that we're going to fund are removing those barriers of not having access to quality, affordable childcare so that we can unlock 100% of the workforce. And I just think that's such a innovative way of approaching this that I haven't seen before. And so I'd like to see a lot more of that as we move forward. But, hats off to Secretary Raimondo and the team at Chips for America for bringing that conversation into what is otherwise an economic workforce conversation. That and childcare are so inextricably linked, aren't they? Thank you, Adrienne. Lots more to discuss. Let's bring it down to the state level. I'm joined by some amazing leaders here in Colorado who have been at the helm of making the most of what's happening at the federal level, particularly thinking about those application processes that have been happening in real time as we've put this conversation together. Wendy, tell me and tell us a little bit about what we are doing here in Colorado to build out our local tech ecosystem and really focus on regional innovation. Oh, you're muted, Wendy.
Thank you very much. I'll be happy to add some commentary, and I'll pull from Adrienne your beginning remarks, because The work we're doing in Colorado, as I mentioned, is in chips and science. So that 50 billion and the whole idea of a fab with suppliers around the fab is a centerpiece of an ecosystem. And we're growing that even further by focusing on a set of technologies, advanced technologies. There are 10 of them in chips and science, and those apply to regional innovation hubs too. So it's a really unique opportunity for Colorado to double down on a strategy that already exists here called advanced industries. And it's also a chance for us to double down on our governor's priority around talent, workforce, opportunity for all. So we're pretty excited that we decide, we organized ourselves to actually pursue a tech hub designation because it aligns so beautifully with our overall state's strategy around advanced industries, and it aligns so beautifully with the governor's priorities. So with that said, I'm going to dig into what that means and what we're doing specifically around workforce and building an inclusive workforce, which is the storyline here in today's conversation. So first of all, let's put our eye on the prize a little bit, because I think this is what got our state excited. And Janine, I want this to get you excited because we need a lot more professionals like you. First of all, the program I'm involved with called Tech Hub is a $10 billion congressional authorization. That $10 billion is over 10 years, and it's going to be distributed ultimately from over 5 to 10 hubs across the US. So just imagine the scale of that. And this is not seed capital, it's growth capital. So growth capital suggests that the conditions in the state that's applying, in this case, Colorado, that their conditions are good for growth, for innovation, for entrepreneurship, and for ecosystems that would lift up the state strategy around advanced industries. So that's important to know. Now, we don't have the entire 10 billion at our fingertips yet. We only have 500 million. So let's come down the ladder so you'll have the deets on this in your head. That was appropriated last year. And we're now making those investments by applying for a grant. So our first grant was simply the designation. We submitted 2. We got a designation for one, and that was quantum, one of the 10 advanced technologies. Now we advance to the second grant. It's due the end of February. It's a short 90-day sprint. Yes, there's plenty of stress around that. And there will be somewhere between 40 and 75 million, give or take, implementation money to invest in. This is catalytic capital to invest in an ecosystem. And in our case, it's around quantum. So that's the high level. There are 70 partners, including Activate Work, inside our consortium. This is an industry-led ecosystem. There are a range, though, of members of nodes that have to be included in the consortia. Workforce, nonprofits, entities is one of those. Again, that's what Helen's representing on the call today. But when we talk about industry-led, we talk about global organizations. We talk about scale-ups that have maybe not gone IPO, but they're growing fast. They've had multiple rounds of venture capital, or we're talking early stage startups. And we're also talking commercialization opportunities inside academia. So in your mind's eye, for those that want to dig in to understand how this activity will actually build a workforce of the future, which is what we're talking about. You're talking about a consortium made up of workforce entities, government, economic development organizations, academia, which could include community college. It can include K through 12, K through 18, and it includes industry. So imagine all those nodes coming together with a specific role to ensure the vision of our Elevate Quantum Tech Hub is realized through the efforts of many, many hands and lots of work. And so that's kind of the setup that I want to offer. And then I want to dive in very quickly to the whole workforce impact vision, and then work back from that, because it's really been critical from day one in learning about this opportunity. I work in the National Council for Innovation and Entrepreneurship. That's inside the Department of Commerce. We work closely with the EDA and NSF. That's where I had the chance to learn all of this, right? I didn't read the policy and then wonder. I was on this council and still am, and just had a chance to brainstorm with Secretary Raimondo and Assistant Secretary Alejandra Castillo and other folks, right? So I was in the deep end of the weeds of how all this was coming forward, even before money was authorized. So from day one, we were told clearly and consistently that this had the major strategic component of this tech hub was workforce and DEIAB from day one, because the stats are staggering. There is not enough workers for the future in advanced technologies and many other sectors as well, but certainly not in this sector. And so the question we had to answer when Colorado started digging in to apply for this federal grant, which is a big lift, is what will we do to build this workforce of the future? And then the first thing we also understood, and because the stats bore this out too, is this is not just about engineering. This is not just about scientists, PhDs. It's not just about software, mechanical, electrical engineering, although those jobs are essential. Our job is to bring all professionals forward to give them access to these new jobs. So I want to be specific about that, because when you hear the word quantum, many of us think about nerdy, scientific, hard, 20 years from now. That is not the case. Our numbers suggest here in Colorado, we have a right to win. We are competing against Chicago. But let me talk about the vision and then some of the job examples of the jobs. First of all, our whole vision is around diversity-fueled innovation. So that's very specific. We imagine that we'll have to accelerate development and maturity of the quantum workforce, the whole ecosystem, workforce in our ecosystem. And it must be inclusive, sustainable, and of course, globally competitive. But when you say all that and you put quantum in the mix, you think engineering, you think physicists, you think all of those kinds of jobs. But what we're here to tell you, and I'm going to end on this, Emilie, so we can go to Helen and Janine, is that half of quantum jobs do not require advanced degrees. 1/2 of the available jobs in this industry we're building out here in Colorado do not require advanced degrees. So this is non-trivial to the strategy that the Department of Commerce has asked us to pull together for our state and our region.
I love it.
2 times the share of technician jobs that are expected to double in the next 5 years is 2x. So let me talk about some of the technician jobs, right? This is fabrication and welding. Part of quantum is hardware. Imagine a big refrigerator with a chandelier in the middle, right? And all these piece parts have to be welded together. It's electrical welding. So that's an example. There's a lot of pipe fitting. What education do you need for that? That's trade. Those are trade educations. There's a lot of machining. We've already talked about that. That's also trade. There's a lot of thermalization and plates that have to be associated in the right way to actually create the speed required to actually make quantum computing and sensors, et cetera. So there's just a wide variety, Emilie, jobs that people would not normally affiliate or associate with an advanced technology like this. It is similar, though, as Adrian knows, to chips, right? So if you go inside a fab, and I've been in plenty, you see a lot of these jobs too, because it is about it. We have advanced manufacturing to make these quantum hardware refrigerators, and we sell them for a lot of money, $1 million each. So it's an exciting time for our state to recognize a couple of things. First of all, the work of organizations like Helen's Activate Work, non-trivial, and this is not year 1 for that organization. So they have many programs. They've specialized in apprenticeships. She'll talk about that. They're proof points galore. So there is technology support, technology jobs coming through Activate Work, but we work with also Front Range Community College, right? Because we've got to make sure, and also with Fort Lewis, we have to make sure that all individuals, all professionals who have an interest in learning more about this sector can look at a job role that could be of interest to them and find out how to get certified in it.
Right.
So that's a long-winded spiel, but it's an important one. Because I don't want to send the message to our Coloradans or anyone else on the call that if you have an interest in quantum, you got to be a PhD. It's just not true. Now, we do need some PhDs because there's a lot of research involved. And when you go inside mines or CU Boulder or CSU or many of the R1s around our state, you will see PhDs working in research on quantum. But when we start commercializing and growing this tech hub to be a global player, we must have these other jobs too.
Right. And I'll jump in here just to say, look, for folks who are tuning in as members of the industry or as potential future members of the industry, or even parents, I've got a 2-year-old and you're thinking about what are the pathways to success in a career 20 years from now. These are the conversations that are happening, as Adrian mentioned, at the federal level, that states are organizing, as Wendy's been doing on behalf of Colorado at the state level. And this is the conversation in whatever state you're in that you're going to want to keep an ear out for, because really what these plans entail are where there are going to be federally funded opportunities moving forward. So if you're someone who's open to career transition, who's looking to be on the cutting edge of the industries of tomorrow, these decisions are being made today.
That's right. And one other thing, impact is how we look at this, right? And so we should be held accountable, our state, this entity. 40% of the roles must be filled by underrepresented groups.
Well, that is the perfect segue.
And that kind of sets it up.
Exactly. And it's the perfect segue because we have more work to do, as we know. Particularly, here at Bossed Up, we focus a lot on gender equity. We're talking about underrepresented groups of all kinds. But to be clear, women who make up, 50 to 51% of the US workforce hold only 28% of jobs right now in computer and mathematical operations, and only 15.9% of jobs in engineering and architecture. I don't have the stats in front of me for the trades, but I know that the numbers are not a whole heck of a lot better. So as we think about the diverse array of job opportunities that are going to cascade from the CHIPS and Science Act, we also want to make sure that we're removing barriers to entry for historically underrepresented folks. Here to share a lot more on that is Helen Young-Hayes. Helen, tell us more about what does it look like to remove barriers and build pathways for underrepresented populations to get into particularly these high-paying jobs of the future.
Well, first of all, thanks, Emilie, for having me. And so pleased to be with everyone online today. And of course, our wonderful speakers. Wendy, I've learned so much about quantum thanks to you in the last 10 minutes. So thank you for that, that tutorial. So I'm going to talk about how we can remove barriers and build pathways for underrepresented populations, especially to get into high-paying tech jobs. But first, I want to just describe our work at Activate. Activate Work is a nonprofit, and our mission is to drive economic mobility and prosperity for individuals from communities that have historically been underrepresented in technology. We are the connective tissue between employers and job seekers. And most importantly, we are the connective tissue. We're the bridge between our learners' inherent potential and their realized success. So what do? We provide free IT training in the form of rigorous 15-week boot camps where individuals will learn and acquire industry-demanded certifications. We pair them with employer partners, and we provide an incredible service for our employers, which is we help them find the talent that they're looking for in the community that have been proven and screened through our rigorous training. We also help employers launch apprenticeship programs, which in my opinion are the best and the surest and the shortest way to get individuals to economic mobility. These apprenticeship programs that we have launched are Department of Labor apprenticeships in cybersecurity, in DevOps, in software engineering, and in IT support. Apprenticeships are an incredible opportunity for individuals to get paid while they learn. So apprenticeship is where an employer finds an apprentice, hires them, and pays them to get the certifications that are in demand by the employer partner. So this is sort of the anti-college equation whereby you're getting paid to learn, you're getting paid by your future employer, and you access these jobs and opportunities without debt and very efficiently. So whom do we serve? We serve low-income individuals. We serve BIPOC individuals. 32% of our learners are women. We are always looking to increase the number of women that we serve. 23% are new immigrants, new Americans. We also serve military and young. I should mention, though, that with 69% of our individuals who are BIPOC, we are over-indexed by 4 times compared to the IT industry for our Black technologists. And we are over-indexed by 2x for our Latino technologists. So we represent an incredible amount of diversity from underrepresented communities. After a free 15-week boot camp, our learners increase their earnings on average by 92% to about $51,000. And after an apprenticeship, our earners have been paid to learn, and they are earning $63,000 to $80,000 during their apprenticeship. They are all earning college credits as well for all of our learning. I'll talk about why IT is the best industry to create on-ramps for prosperity. There's a 1.2 million person talent shortage in the US. It will take us 22 years to fill out that talent gap at the rate with which we graduate comp sci and STEM students in the US. The average IT job is $104,000, which is twice the private sector average. And there is both a lack of diversity and a strong desire for diversity among tech employers. Tech is one of those great industries where you do not need a college degree to be successful. And because of this confluence of characteristics, I believe the IT sector is the absolute best industry to create on-ramps to prosperity and to drive win-win-wins. The tech opportunity within the CHIPS Act is remarkable for one very strong reason, and that is because from the beginning, we have designed our application with DEI, A and B, diversity, equity, inclusion, access and belonging, and with workforce as central and core to the ecosystem that we're building. We were able to take a blank slate and build very intentional, broad, expansive, and inclusive on-ramps to these jobs. And so how will we specifically bring more underrepresented individuals into quantum and into this ecosystem? One, through our employers who will commit to removing barriers. I implore anyone who's an employer online today to get rid of the college degree requirement. Degrees artificially block talent, and they're not needed for IT jobs. Some 60% of American workers do not hold a 4-year degree. 76% of African Americans and 83% of Latinx workers do not hold a college degree. So why automatically exclude the majority of your potential talent pool? Instead, what we need to move to are industry standard skills and credentials and skills-based hiring, which is actually 5 times more predictive of future job performance than educational background anyway. Additionally, for people who are seeking to get into the field, I would encourage them to look at alternative programs that are less expensive and take less time than college. For example, short-term credentialing programs, micro-credentialing programs, as well as apprenticeship. These deliver in the IT industry to tech employers the skills that are actually wanted. And for individuals looking to switch careers or re-enter the workforce, there are many online courses that you can take, as well as boot camps, as well as workforce training programs like Activate Work or our national nonprofit partner, which is Perscolas. So for individuals seeking to get into the IT field, I would encourage them to take bite-sized approaches to talent and to talent acquisition. And finally, I would say that one of the most important ways to remove barriers and build pathways for underrepresented individuals to get into these high-paying jobs really falls on the shoulders of both government and donors. Government must support workforce development programs that broaden access to training and credentialing that help us fill the IT talent gap, as well as the overall skill shortage that we have in our nation, and bring more individuals into the economy through workforce development spending. An interesting and frightening statistic is that workforce development spending has declined by 2/3 in absolute terms over the last 4 decades, has declined by 2/3 over the last 4 decades, but the labor force has grown by 50%. We are underspending on workforce development. And in fact, we underspend other OECD countries, other wealthy countries, by some 30%. So we need to invest in our talent and in our workforce. We also need, as philanthropists, donors, foundations, to understand that the more we can unlock potential for individuals, the more we can build on-ramps to prosperity, and it creates a virtuous cycle of increasing the tax base, improving our schools, improving our roads, and enabling people to achieve their fullest potential. So again, I think that we have so many opportunities in areas for basically everyone wearing any hat to build more on-ramps for underrepresented individuals. By the way, I would encourage anyone on listening today who is interested to check us out at www.activatework.org, or Perscolas, our national nonprofit partner with 21 different sites across the nation, at www.perscolas.org, and I'll put that in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Helen. And I have Activate Work in the chat just from a few minutes earlier for folks who want to check it out. Do you all hear why I am so proud of what's happening in Colorado? I know my podcast listeners are getting sick of me bragging about life in Colorado since I moved here 7 years ago. But look, Bossed Up, we serve organizations and individuals globally, but I cannot shout enough from the rooftops about how dynamic an ecosystem exists here in Denver and Colorado writ large when it comes to workforce development, diversity, equity, and inclusion, building that inclusive economy that Helen's at the helm of, bringing these tech ecosystems together. Don't let these, lofty, highly technical industries put any of us off either. I'm a poli-sci major, y'all. I'm a liberal arts gal myself. And when I'm hearing about IT, the trades, engineering, tech, there is so much opportunity available, and there are not enough women who are reaping the rewards of these opportunities. So just to add to the anti-college chorus, not that I don't love my college degree. I loved my college experience, but, before you go get that grad degree, please think about shorter term solutions that are more affordable and aren't going to leave us in debt. As a millennial, I have to say that on behalf of my most educated and indebted generation in history. Now, look, Janine, we've been talking about women in technology engineering. We've been talking about first gen folks, getting more folks of color, getting more women into the field. You're doing it. You're living it. So tell us a little bit about your journey into engineering and why that's inspired you to be a part of building more pathways for more women, and particularly women of color, to enter these fields. Help us know what it's really like. And thank you for bringing it to the individual level, as we've started at the top, federal, state, workforce development. And now tell us about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Emilie, and thank you so much to the rest of the panelists. I think I have learned so much within the last 45 minutes, what we're doing at the federal and the local level here in Colorado. So I have been a homebrewed Colorado native. I grew up just outside of Longmont, Colorado. All this to say, it was a pretty small town at the time. And a pretty small school, I guess, high school that I came from. I always enjoyed math and science growing up, but I actually didn't really know what engineering was until my senior year of high school, when there was actually an outreach event kind of highlighting what science, technology, engineering, and math was, the STEM degrees. And I knew that I loved rockets. I grew up posting little pictures and watching videos of the live feed space shuttle launches down at the Cape growing up. So I put two and two together and thought, yeah, I really like math and science, and I'm fascinated by the cosmos and space. I guess it's called aerospace engineering. So I ended up going to CU Boulder. But when I arrived at the university, I would say I was very much a non-traditional student. And I kind of took a non-traditional path to get my degree. I excelled in academics when I was in high school, but when I got to college, I realized that I was the folks that looked like me, both in a peer perspective and in academia, really were few and far between, I would say. And I think the technical baseline that I got from my high school, which was already in kind of an underrepresented community, wasn't maybe up to snuff to my peers in college. So I think there was a lot of imposter syndrome. My parents are immigrants from El Salvador, so I was a first generation student as well at the university in a very male dominated discipline, engineering. So my work that I did at CU Boulder was honestly pretty difficult. It took me about 7 years from start to finish to get my undergraduate degree, whereas it usually takes the traditional 4 years, right? And that was with me working part-time or multiple jobs at the same time as going to school full-time, and then taking a gap year because I was honestly burnt out in the middle of my undergrad degree. But I made it, right? And leveraging a lot of the organizations that I've been a part of as a collegiate, including SHIP and SWE, Society of Women Engineers, as well as the network that I had built. I made it into the aerospace industry, and I currently work at Ball Aerospace. But yeah, I think the journey that I had in engineering as a first generation Latino student is honestly, I am not the exception. I think it's honestly, when I look back at all the students that are going through this process, right, of the collegiate to professional transition, I think there is a number of barriers, and just even the fact that you don't really see anybody or many individuals that look like you going through these degree programs. It can be demoralizing at times. But I think something that has helped me is really leveraging my network and finding these great organizations where you can really find your niche, and essentially a support system of getting you through into this pathway of a more technical route. So I'm grateful for that. As far as what I'm doing now that I am in industry for to encourage and build pathways for women and women of color entering the field, um, I like to be present, whatever that may look like, and in whatever capacity that may be. So I really enjoy going in conferences and representing both my company and my industry. I think representation really matters. So when you see a collegiate student or a potential employee coming and talking to your company directly, or you go to a public speaking event, you are essentially the face, right? Face of the industry, face of your company. And I think when folks see that there is somebody that looks like them, that has had a similar journey, I think that certainly helps and encourages. I think I've also have really had the privilege of being involved with SWE that does so much K through 12 outreach, collegiate outreach, essentially helping women at all stages of their life, women and allies at all stages of their lives, going into technical degrees, helping with the collegiate to transition. Collegiate to professional transition, and essentially mentoring women and allies throughout these different phases of their lives. Um, and something that I'm really proud of, because we've been talking about institutional changes and what these different organizations have been doing to support underrepresented communities. CU Boulder, and I guess I will send a plug because that is my alma mater, just came out with a phenomenal program under Dean Keith Molinar. It's called the Lattice Program, where and has been implemented for the first time this fall of 2023, or this academic year, where they are essentially sponsoring full rides for first generation students at the university. So this is absolutely huge, right? And what I had talked about going through my academic career and kind of struggling with having to juggle so many things while going to school, I think this is definitely a way where these programs are paving and really being at the forefront of removing barriers and lifting these underrepresented communities to a level, to essentially level the playing field, right? And to encourage these underrepresented communities to continue in industry, and essentially showing them that they have a seat at the table.
Thing. I mean, talk about workforce development. A full ride to a program like that will certainly help remove barriers like the ones that you experienced. Janine, I just want to highlight that this is what an aerospace engineer looks like, right? Like we just don't
Yeah.
see folks like you often enough. So thank you for for being a living embodiment of what we're talking about here, and for all the ways in which you inspire others to follow your trajectory and hopefully make the path a little easier for those who come behind us. That's one of the mottos that we always come back to here at Bossed Up, is lifting as we
Absolutely.
climb. The original motto of America's first Black women's clubs really were about, advocating for our own advancement and making those pathways to advancement easier for those who come behind us. Wow, I am so delighted to have had this time with you all. I've got one final question for my panelists, and then time permitting, we will ask some from our phenomenal guests and attendees here today. If we don't have a chance to get to your question, email me, or I will be in your inbox shortly anyway with follow-up, including links that have been flying through chat here. Panelists, my final question for each of you, and let's go in reverse order. We'll start with you, Janine, then Helen, then Wendy, then Adrian. What advice or resources do you want to share for women who are interested in STEM and pursuing these new pathways? You've already given us so much, Janine, but anything else comes to mind?
I think I would just reiterate what I have already said. I think one of the biggest helps that I had during my collegiate career, and now even as a professional, right, is just finding those local organizations or these amazing companies like Activate Work that can help support you and kind of meet you where you currently are at, whether that be you've taken a hiatus from industry and now you're re-entering the workforce, you're going through the collegiate to professional transition, you're trying to get into a more technical field. Um, there's countless organizations. And of course, I'm very biased towards SWE because it has been such an instrumental part of my journey. But that isn't to say that there isn't so many other organizations and significant amount of people that are working behind these organizations to help kind of find your niche and help you to find your spot within industry or where you want to be.
You mentioned an organization, SHIP, earlier. What is that organization?
Society for Hispanic Professional Engineers.
Okay, awesome. Society for Hispanic
Professional.
Okay,
Correct. Yep.
amazing. We'll make sure to include that in the follow-up as well. Thank you so much. I always say, as women in particular, we derive courage from community. So I cannot underscore what you just said anymore. Thanks so much, Janine. Helen, what would you share?
Well, in addition to checking out nonprofit IT training programs like Activate Work, I would recommend a few things. First of all, if you have a desire and an interest to acquire or access training or a job in IT and STEM, the first thing I would say is don't talk yourself out of it. Women tend to talk themselves and sell themselves short. We will tell ourselves that we're not qualified, and we'll tap out of an opportunity because we're wired that way sometimes. And I would just say, don't talk yourself out of it. Go for it, and then build courage through connecting with those of us in the IT field, with individuals like Janine, who can really help you understand that that this is doable, and that the IT industry not only needs, but also wants, is looking actively for more female representation. And so you would be doing both yourself and the industry a favor from getting into it. I would also encourage learning. Do as much LinkedIn Learning or other Google certificates, et cetera, that you can to build your own skills while you're looking for that next opportunity.
I love it. Shameless plug. I'm a LinkedIn Learning instructor and can't speak more highly of the platform. So love hearing them come to mind for you. Briefly, I know we have limited time because we have a hard stop at the top of the hour. Wendy, what would you add as a resource? Oop, you're muted, Wendy.
Noise in the background. Okay, simple ad. The National Center for Women in Technology, NCWIT. So this is a 20-year-old organization. They do a range of programs and activities. I just think all of us, if you're on the call or even on the panel, I know Helen knows NCWIT well, really designed to drive, create change, right? And to bring along change agents as we go in K through 12, you know, in higher ed, in the whole spectrum. And I think the research they've done, the visibility they've gotten with corporates has been pretty remarkable. And so I would just want folks to understand that that is a resource for us. They are headquartered in Colorado. They are a national organization and have been doing this amazing work for 2 decades. So it's one of those organizations, because it is an NGO, it's kind of easy to miss.
Right.
But it is part of the march.
And right
Good.
here in Colorado,
That's right.
add it to the list of how Colorado is just
That's right.
at the top of the pack. I love it, Wendy. Thank you so much. Adrian, I know we just have 2 minutes. Any last words of advice you'd share?
Yeah, look, I think, you know, all the incredible women on this panel today really emphasize some of the resources that are out there, especially for Colorado. The government has a number of resources too, but I think the parting words I will leave today is, if you have a child, if you have a daughter or a son who want to go into STEM research, my goodness, please encourage them, because we simply don't have enough people right now who are interested in that field. You know, 20 years ago or so, coding was really, you know, where it was at. People were really excited about getting into coding, and that's still important, but we need people to get excited about the semiconductor industry, because if we are going to thrive, if we are going to remain competitive and stay competitive here in the United States, we need more people who are working in the industry. And as I think every single panelist laid out today, these don't have to be jobs that require 4-year college degrees or advanced engineering degrees. A lot of these jobs can be filled, you know, at the community college level with a little bit of apprenticeship training. But we need more people in this industry. It is only going to be a successful industry, you know, way off into the future. It's going to be a great industry to get into. Encourage your children, get them trained up now, and you know, also encourage your friends to get off the sidelines and join some of these training programs locally where a lot of the semiconductor activity is taking place, because it's a great industry to get involved in.
Adrian, if you would have told me that I'd be hosting a panel about semiconductor manufacturing even 6 months ago, I would have been like, what is that? And now here at FOSDEP, we had a recent podcast episode with your phenomenal colleague, Kylie Patterson, who came to talk all about semiconductor manufacturing. This conversation is a step in the right direction. I encourage every one of us, including my fellow liberal arts degree holding folks, to pay attention, because this is where the industry is headed. This is where our country is headed. This is where so much opportunity awaits. Thank you all so much. I want to be respectful of our panelists' time, so I will let you all go. I'll be in your inboxes with more follow-up. If your question, which we have some great questions here we didn't have a chance to get to, send it my way. I can do my best to point you in the right direction. Thank you, Adrian, Wendy, Helen, Young-Hayes, and Janine, Vela, Rao. Thank you so much for being here today and for the work you're doing. Take care, everyone.